The old house creaked as the wind passed through the pines outside, whispering secrets Sarah Anderson couldn't quite hear, but definitely felt. She paused at the edge of the hallway, laundry basket in her hands, staring at the guest bedroom. That room again. Max, their 4-year-old German shepherd, stood stiffly in front of her, his body taut, ears pinned back. His amber eyes locked on hers, silently pleading, commanding. Sarah shifted her weight, trying to step past him. "No, Max," she murmured gently. "It's just towels." But the moment she moved, so did he, blocking her path, head lowered, a low growl rumbling from deep in his chest. The basket slipped from her hands and thudded against the floor. Max didn't flinch. He didn't even blink. His gaze flicked toward the door again. For weeks now, Sarah had felt it. This strange, creeping unease in their new home. A chill in the air where there shouldn't be one. The sense that someone, or something, was watching her. Blake had told her it was the stress talking. That the miscarriage, the move, the new job, it was all piling up. That she needed rest. Maybe to call Dr. Collins again. But Max disagreed. And Max wasn't the type to imagine things. At first, it had been small. A coffee mug moved. A door closed that she knew she'd left open. Shadows that seemed to flicker in the corner of her vision. But over time, the dog had changed too. He'd become more alert, more tense. And now, as he stood growling between her and that room, Sarah's skin crawled with the sensation that he wasn't just being protective, he was afraid. Still, it made no sense. The house was beautiful, historic, a fresh start in a quiet Montana town. Everyone had said it. Blake, the realtor, even the friendly old couple next door. It was perfect. So why did Max act like a predator was inside that room? Sarah slowly crouched down beside him, laying a calming hand on his back. His muscles quivered beneath her touch. "It's okay," she whispered, though the tremble in her voice betrayed her. "You're just being a good boy, right?" But Max's growl deepened, and in that moment, for the first time, Sarah truly wondered, not if the house was haunted or if she was cracking under the weight of her past, but if someone was still here, someone who had never left, and if Max knew the truth. From the very beginning, Sarah had felt like the house had picked them. It was Blake who had found the listing, a Victorian nestled on the outskirts of a town called Oakage, Montana, a town so small it barely registered on GPS. The pictures were stunning. Wraparound porch, gingerbread trim, towering pines standing like sentinels around the property. The price? Suspiciously low for its size and charm. "We could build a life here," Blake had said, excitement softening the edges of his usual pragmatism. Sarah had stared at the screen for a long time, her eyes tracing the elegant staircase, the crown molding, the sunlight slanting through tall windows. For a moment, she let herself imagine it. Her own classroom full of giggling 5-year-olds, quiet evenings on the porch swing, laughter echoing through the halls that had been silent for too long, and no longer hearing, in the middle of the night, the baby cries that never existed. "I want to see it," she'd whispered. The first visit confirmed her hopes and stirred her unease. The house was indeed beautiful, solidly built with original wood floors and a history dating back over a century, but certain rooms felt wrong. The guest bedroom upstairs, for one, and the master bathroom, where the layout seemed strangely forced, as if a portion had been walled off for no clear reason. The realtor, Janet Prescott, had rushed them through those spaces, her voice overly chipper, her fingers fidgeting with the clasp of her gold necklace. "All old houses have quirks," she'd chirped when Sarah asked about the strange wall in the bathroom. "You'll learn to love it. And honestly, you won't find a better deal in all of Oakage." Blake, ever the contractor, had already begun calculating renovation plans. "It's got good bones," he'd said, running a hand along a window frame. "A few fixes, it'll be perfect." Still, Sarah had paused, glancing back toward the shadowed hallway behind her. Something didn't feel perfect. Something felt off. It didn't help that when Blake casually mentioned the address at the local hardware store, the clerk had exchanged a look with a coworker and muttered, Old Blackwood place, huh? Interesting choice. But no one elaborated. Just small-town gossip, Blake said, and Sarah wanted to believe him. They signed the papers 3 weeks later. The move went smoothly enough. Boxes and furniture, laughter and sweat. Max trotting anxiously through the chaos as he sniffed every corner of their new world. Sarah had insisted on getting a dog after the miscarriage, hoping the presence of another life in the house might help anchor her. They'd found Max at a shelter just outside Oakage. The shelter manager had been blunt. "This one's got some history. He's not dangerous, but he's wary, especially of men." Sarah had knelt beside the kennel. Max had approached, slow and deliberate. When his head pressed against the chain link, she'd felt something shift inside her. He reminded her of herself, of what it meant to survive something unspoken. "I want this one," she'd said firmly. Blake had hesitated but relented. And as the days passed, even he admitted there was something noble about the dog, something protective. In the early weeks, Sarah busied herself with small comforts: new curtains, fresh paint, mugs hung in neat rows in the kitchen. Max followed, her like a shadow, always close but never intrusive. She began to feel a rhythm returning, something resembling peace, but the house had its own rhythm, and Sarah soon found herself out of sync. It started with a chill, not metaphorical, literal. A sudden drop in temperature that would hit her without warning, like someone had opened a freezer behind her. Always in the same places: the shower, the guest bedroom, the linen closet on the upstairs landing. Blake dismissed it. Old house. Drafts everywhere. She wanted to agree, but the feeling wasn't like a draft. It was directional, intentional, like something was brushing past her. Then came the night Max first growled at the hallway. Sarah had been brushing her teeth, humming to herself, when the sound stopped her cold. A low, guttural growl rising from the darkness outside the bathroom. She found Max there, facing the guest bedroom. Tail stiff, teeth bared. She called his name. He didn't move, and when she tried to walk past him, toward the bedroom, he lunged sideways to block her. From that night forward, he never let her near that room alone. "He's just anxious," Blake said. "He's adjusting." But Sarah wasn't so sure. She'd started to keep a journal, quiet, secret entries in a notebook she hid in the nightstand. Cold spots, moved items, Max's behavior, footsteps when Blake was out. The sensation, stronger, now, of being watched. She said nothing more to Blake, not after the last time. "Maybe call Dr. Collins," he'd said gently, after she described seeing a shadow move across the shower glass. "You've been through a lot, hun. You might be sensitized." That was the word he used. Sensitized. She didn't blame him. After the miscarriage, after the sleepless nights filled with imagined cries and phantom lullabies, she'd lost credibility in his eyes. Not his love, just his faith. Still, it hurt. And it left her alone. Except for Max. He was always there, always watching. And never more alert than when she stepped near that guest bedroom door. There was one night she'd never forget. She'd decided to push through. Just towels, she'd told herself. Just a bathroom that needed cleaning. She carried a folded stack. Down the hall. Max trailed her, his gait tight with resistance. As she reached for the doorknob, he moved, swift and sudden, lunged between her and the door, teeth flashing. Sarah stumbled backward, dropping the towels. Max didn't attack. He didn't bite. He stood guard, his hackles raised, a growl like thunder in his chest, his body rigid as stone, and in his eyes. Not just protection, not just warning. Panic. He was afraid of what was on the other side of that door. "18 days after they moved in, Sarah's world shifted. She'd been home alone, grading papers at the kitchen table, the late afternoon sun slanting through the windows. She rinsed her favorite coffee mug, white ceramic, world's best teacher, printed in fading blue, and placed it on the counter. When she turned around to return to her grading, the mug was gone. It sat on the dining room table. She stared at it for a long moment. Her memory wasn't foggy. She knew exactly where she'd put it, but there it was, dry and empty, far from the sink. That night, Blake chuckled. Stress does funny things, honey. Remember your phone last week? You tore apart the car looking for it, and it was in your coat pocket the whole time. She laughed with him, but her fingers trembled on the rim of her glass. 2 days later, Max refused to enter the guest bedroom. He'd followed her through the house, loyal as ever, until she turned down the hall. Then he stopped. Flattened ears. Tail low. When she called him, he whimpered but didn't move. Sarah placed the folded towels on the bed and walked out quickly. Max was waiting for her, his gaze locked on her face, as if asking, "Why did you go in there?" Then came the footsteps, faint at first. Upstairs, down the hallway, always when she was alone. Then the cold. The master bathroom became unbearable. Showers ended in shivers no matter how hot the water. She'd feel it, an icy breath on the back of her neck, a sensation that made her skin crawl. Once she saw a shadow pass across the fogged glass of the shower door. She called for Blake. No answer. He had already left for work. When she told him that night, his tone was kind, but tight. "Maybe call Dr. Collins again," he said, not unkindly. "This move has been hard, especially with everything before. You said the city made you feel watched. Maybe it's just a different kind of echo." Sarah nodded and stopped talking. But she kept writing, every odd moment, every flicker of fear noted in a small blue journal tucked under the bed. She didn't trust her voice anymore, but she trusted her pen. Max's behavior grew stranger with each passing day. He never let her out of his sight. He began sleeping pressed against her side of the bed, his body tense even in sleep. When Blake approached her too quickly, Max would rise and place himself between them. Not growling, just watching. "That dog needs serious training," Blake muttered one night after Max stopped him from hugging Sarah from behind. "Or maybe he just doesn't belong here." "He's protecting me," Sarah said, her voice cool. "You should ask why he feels I need protecting." The silence after that sentence was long and sharp. Blake slept in the guest room that night. The same room Max refused to enter. That night, Sarah lay awake, listening. Something scratched faintly within the walls. Not mice. Too steady. Too deliberate. To ease tension, and perhaps his guilt, Blake installed security cameras the following weekend. "Now you can check everything from your phone," he said, showing her the app. "If it's raccoons or mice, we'll catch them." Red-handed. The cameras were standard, motion-activated, one in the kitchen, one in the hallway, one pointed at the back door. Sarah appreciated the gesture, even if she doubted they'd catch what she feared most. Then came the morning that changed everything. The sky was clear, crisp. Autumn biting through the pine trees. Blake had left for a 3-day job in Missoula. Sarah was alone. Max had been pacing since dawn, refusing to leave her side. He whined outside the bathroom door as she prepared to shower, his nails clicking on the tile. She closed the door gently. "Just 10 minutes, boy," she whispered. The shower had barely begun when she noticed it. A red light blinking faintly from the ceiling vent. She stood still, staring. It pulsed once. Then again, heart pounding, Sarah climbed onto the tub's edge and unscrewed the vent cover with a hairpin. Inside, neatly hidden behind the slats, was a camera. Small, matte black, professional grade. Its lens pointed directly at the shower. She wrapped it in a towel, trembling, and called Blake. "I'm coming home," he said immediately, his voice sharp with alarm. "Don't touch anything else. Don't call the police, not yet." Those 3 hours were the longest of her life. She sat in the kitchen, Max pressed to her legs, eyes locked on every creak and shadow. Blake arrived breathless, his hands white. As he turned over the device, "This isn't some off-the-shelf nanny cam," he muttered. "This is serious equipment." They searched the house together. They found 2 more, one in the vent above their bed, another behind a vent grill in the home office. All of them pointed toward private areas, spaces where Sarah had undressed, slept, cried. "This isn't paranoia," Blake said hoarsely. "We're calling the police." Detective Hank Morrison arrived an hour later. He was heavy-set, disinterested, and dismissive. Probably installed by the old guy who lived here. He grunted, scratching his chin. Lots of folks get paranoid. When they're alone, falls are common. Maybe he just wanted to be prepared. In the shower? Sarah snapped. Morrison shrugged. Could have been concerned about medical emergencies. Blake asked about fingerprints. This isn't CSI, Morrison said, half laughing. You can file a report if you want. My advice, toss the cameras and move on. He left, and the silence in his wake was deafening. He didn't believe us, Sarah said finally. Just like you didn't. I believe you now, Blake whispered. The next day at Oakage Market, a woman touched Sarah's elbow. You live in the Blackwood house, don't you? Sarah turned. The woman had Sarah's auburn hair, same wary eyes. I'm Melissa Blackwood, she said. My father owned that house before he died. Over coffee, Melissa revealed everything. He changed in that house, she said softly. He moved in after Mom died. Said he wanted the space, but over time he got paranoid. Said he heard things, felt watched, but he could barely use a cell phone. He didn't install anything. She slid a leather-bound journal across the table. Dad kept this. The police said he fell down the stairs, but I never believed it. Sarah opened it. Handwriting, shaky but legible. Whispers in the walls, objects moving. The sense of being studied. The last entry was chilling. There, in the spaces. Between, they watch, they listen. They wait. Tucked in the back of the journal were blueprints, old ones, pre-renovation. You need to look at these, Melissa said. Back home, Sarah sat in bed while Blake slept, flashlight in hand, blueprints spread before her. The walls didn't. Not quite. Some were thicker than they should be. Hallways were narrower, rooms slightly off-center. There were spaces that didn't exist on the surface. Gaps. Hollow places. The house was hiding something, and now Sarah knew. They weren't alone. The blueprints didn't lie. Sarah spent hours comparing them to the house's current layout. The differences were subtle, a wall half a foot thicker, a ceiling vent slightly off-center, but undeniable. What once seemed like architectural quirks now looked like calculated deceit. Someone had redesigned this house, not to modernize, not for comfort, but to observe. Armed with a measuring tape and a stick of chalk, Sarah began mapping the anomalies. Max followed closely, ears perked, tail stiff. He barked at certain spots on the walls, growling low when they passed the guest bedroom. Sometimes he pawed at baseboards or sat rigidly beside a stretch of wall, staring like he could hear something no one else could. In the guest bedroom closet, Sarah found the first hole, tiny, deliberately round. It pierced through the wall into the master bedroom, right at the bed. She leaned in slowly, heart thudding. A clear view, direct and unobstructed. It wasn't the only one. By the time Blake returned that evening, she had found 7 peepholes. One in the kitchen ceiling above the breakfast table, another behind a painting in the hallway. Some were disguised as knots in the wood, others as vent screws or wall blemishes. This isn't paranoia, Sarah said, her voice low and steady. This was designed. Blake stood frozen, staring through one of the holes. Someone's been watching us for weeks, maybe months. Sarah hesitated, then added, I'm pregnant. The words dropped between them like a stone. Blake turned slowly, his expression shifting from shock to joy to something darker, fear. He knelt and wrapped his arms around her. This isn't just about us anymore, she whispered. We can't ignore this. The next morning, Blake made calls. He canceled jobs, told his crew he needed personal time. Then he and Sarah began documenting every scratch in the wall, every cold spot, every recorded anomaly from the cameras. Sarah kept a spreadsheet. Time, location, type of disturbance. Patterns emerged. The activity spiked between 2 a.m. and 4 a.m., increased when Blake was gone. Most concentrated in areas Sarah frequented. Bathroom, bedroom, kitchen. It's you, Blake said quietly. They're focused on you. The pregnancy, Sarah replied. the bile rising in her throat. They knew we were trying. They were listening. The idea settled like lead in their stomachs. This wasn't a random peeping Tom. This was targeted. That night, Blake took first watch. He sat in a chair by their bedroom door, phone in hand, headphones in, monitoring the security feed. At 3:17 a.m., he woke Sarah. "Listen," he whispered, showing her the screen. Footsteps, soft, measured, coming from the attic that didn't exist. He played a second clip. Kitchen camera, time-stamped 2:43 a.m. The refrigerator door opened on its own. Then, an apple, a leftover container, a bottle of water, all lifted from inside, all vanished upward, as if pulled by invisible hands. Sarah pressed a hand to her stomach. "They're in the walls." By dawn, they had a plan. They called Harold Williams. The old neighbor arrived by 7:30 a.m., his face pale, eyes serious. "I've been watching your house," he admitted. "Even when the Blackwoods lived here. Something's wrong with that place." He wasn't surprised by what they showed him. "I used to be a detective in Chicago," he said. "But here, they thought I was a senile old man. Said I watched too many horror films." He pulled out files, clippings, handwritten notes. 3 women, missing over the past 5 years, all in nearby counties, all childbearing age, all lived in homes built by the same construction company, Meridian Builders. Robert Dawson founded that company, Harold said grimly. Disappeared in 1984, but his family didn't. Lucas Dawson confirmed it. Sarah ran into him at the grocery store again. He was thin, pale, jittery. "You need to leave," he whispered. "They're coming. They know about the baby." Blake pulled Lucas into their home, demanded answers. "Lucas, broke. My grandfather didn't disappear. He's still alive. He built the passages. And my father, Richard, he's the one running it now." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Why?" "They believe in creating a better generation," Lucas said. "They choose women. Healthy, smart, isolated. They watch them, breed them, take them. Raise the children in controlled environments. You were selected, just like the others." Sarah felt the world tilt. "They're coming tonight," Lucas said. "They know you found the cameras. They don't leave loose ends." Max growled. Outside, the wind picked up. Blake bolted the doors. Harold cleaned his old service pistol. Edith called in a favor to a friend at the sheriff's office, quietly. The police wouldn't help. Not the local ones, not Morrison. But the county might. Sarah paced, hands on her belly. "This is my home. They're not taking me." At dusk, Max barked sharply at the wall near the linen closet. Blake ran a thermometer across it. The reading dropped by 10 degrees. He found a hidden... "Seem it's a door," he whispered. They prepared. Blake with a crowbar. Harold with his gun. Edith on the phone. Lucas in the corner, shaking. Sarah insisted on staying. "This is happening to me. I need to see." Max stayed glued to her side. When Blake pried the wall open, it clicked like a lock giving way. A narrow corridor opened, lit with dim LED lights. Inside, wires, cables, footprints in the dust. "They've been living in here," Sarah said softly. Then, movement. Max growled, body low. A figure emerged, a young man, pale, dirty, hands raised. "My name is Lucas," he whispered, "and I'm not alone." Then came the crash, windows breaking, doors shattering. They were here. The sound of glass shattering upstairs was sharp and final. It was followed by a second crash from the back of the house. Wood splintering, a door kicked in. Sarah screamed as Max lunged in front of her, barking wildly. Blake grabbed her hand and pulled her into the kitchen where Edith was shouting into her phone. "They've breached the house," she cried. "We need backup now." Harold stood firm at the foot of the stairs, gun drawn. "Everyone stay behind me." A shadow moved at the top landing. "Police officer," Harold shouted. "Come out slowly." From within the passage, a voice echoed. "Don't shoot. I'm coming out." A young man emerged, pale, shaking. It was Lucas, but something had changed. His eyes no longer darted like prey. They burned with warning. "They're coming," he said breathlessly. "My father, my grandfather, and others. They know about the baby. They won't stop." He stepped into the hall just as Max whirled around, growling toward the kitchen. The back door exploded inward. Richard Dawson stood there, framed by smoke, a hunting knife gleaming in his hand. His face twisted, in fury as he stepped forward. "You weren't supposed to find the passages," he said calmly. None of the others did, until it was too late. His gaze settled on Sarah, then her stomach. Blake moved between them, brandishing a kitchen knife. "Stay away from her," Max launched first. He hit Richard mid-sentence, snarling, fangs flashing. The man staggered, slashed, caught Max across the shoulder. Blood spattered the floor. "No!" Sarah screamed as the dog yelped but didn't fall. He held his grip, forcing Richard backward. A second man burst through the front door, James Dawson. Blake intercepted him with a shoulder charge, both men crashing into the living room furniture, fighting. Amid the chaos, Sarah grabbed Edith's arm. "We have to go." They rushed for the back door. Richard broke free. He lunged at them. Edith spun around. No longer just the casserole-carrying neighbor, but a protector. She threw herself into his path. He stabbed her. Sarah screamed as Edith crumpled. She fled through the back door, stumbling onto the porch. Autumn air slashed her lungs. Behind her, the house groaned with struggle and fury. "Blake!" she cried, and then he was there, bleeding, panting, Max limping behind. They ran. The woods loomed ahead, dense, cold, dark. Sarah turned at the edge of the trees, just long enough to see flames licking up the side of the house. Smoke billowed. Sirens, faint but rising, echoed in the distance. They ran. Branches tore at their faces. Leaves crunched underfoot. Max, though wounded, kept pace. "Alert! We need to find Elliot's cabin," Sarah gasped. "It's the only safe place," Blake nodded. "Half a mile, maybe more." They pressed on. Twice they froze, hearing voices, flashlights sweeping through the trees. The Dawsons were searching. Max led the way, his nose low, ears pivoting. At one point, he growled and redirected them off course. Seconds, before a search party passed yards from where they'd just been. Finally, a clearing. The cabin, unassuming, metal roof, covered windows, smoke from the chimney. As they stepped into the open, the door burst open. Elliot Porter stood there, not the quiet recluse. This Elliot was alert, armed, ready. "I've been watching the house," he said. "Get inside, now." Sarah hesitated. "Why should we trust you?" He pointed to the radio on his desk. "Harold called. He's alive. He said to expect you." Max growled once, then relaxed. That was enough. They rushed inside. The cabin was a command center, monitors, maps, FBI files. Elliot locked the door. "They're close, but I've got eyes on them." Sarah collapsed into a chair, one hand on her stomach, the other tangled in Max's fur. Elliot briefed them. "The Dawsons aren't just a family, they're a network. Meridian Builders was just a front. They built dozens of homes across the Northwest, each modified for surveillance, abduction, control." Sarah's stomach turned. "They target women," Elliot continued. "Young, healthy, high reproductive potential. They breed them, raise the children in isolation." Max whimpered. Blake whispered, "How many?" "Lucas says at least 30. Kids, maybe more." Sirens grew louder outside, then movement on the monitors. 4 figures, Richard, James, Lucas, under duress. And a 4th man, Robert Dawson, Elliot muttered. "The patriarch." The monitors flickered. Robert walked to the edge of the woods, placed a device on a tree. Elliot's eyes widened. "Down! Now!" He tackled Sarah to the floor. Seconds later, explosion. The propane tank behind the cabin erupted. The wall blew inward. Flames roared. "Out!" Elliot yelled, dragging Sarah to her feet. They bolted through the front door, into the trees, toward a drainage ditch. Sarah stumbled. Blake caught her. Max followed, wounded but undeterred. Behind them, the cabin burned. From the smoke, The Dawsons. Emerged 4 hunters, calm, patient. Lucas was dragged along, gun to his head. Robert called out, "You've lost, Agent Porter. Give us the woman and the rest of you can leave." Elliot stood. "Federal agent, drop your weapons." They didn't. Sarah rose. "I'll go with you," she called. "Don't hurt them." Blake grabbed her arm. "Don't," she turned. "For our baby." She stepped forward. Halfway there, Max tensed. "Ready," she whispered. "Now." Max exploded from the ditch. He hit Richard squarely, tearing into his arm. Simultaneously, Sarah dropped. Elliot opened fire. Blake tackled James. Lucas elbowed his captor and dove for cover. A shot rang out. Harold emerged from the trees. Deputies behind him. James dropped. Robert grabbed Lucas, gun to his head. "I'll kill him," he shouted. "Don't," Sarah screamed. Lucas met her eyes, whispered, "I'm sorry." Then he dropped. Dead weight. The opening was brief, but enough. Deputies fired. Robert staggered, dropped. Silence. Max whimpered, bleeding, barely breathing. Sarah ran to him, held his head in her lap. "Please, stay." A breath, then another. Blake fell beside them, bloodied, exhausted, whole sirens, agents, paramedics. Harold limped from the trees. Sarah pressed a hand to her stomach. The child was still, but safe. They had survived. Max had saved them. But the nightmare wasn't over. Not yet. They said the house would be sealed off indefinitely. The FBI moved in within hours, documenting every inch, every hidden passage, every wire woven into the walls like veins of something long dead, but not yet buried. Sarah didn't return. She stayed at the veterinary hospital, curled beside Max's kennel, one hand resting on his slow-rising chest, the other over her growing belly. Blake visited daily, splitting his time between Sarah, Max, and the team of agents sifting through the shattered remains of their fresh start. Max had 3 broken ribs, a punctured lung, deep lacerations. "The next 48 hours are critical," the vet said. "But if any dog can make it, it's him." They waited. Sarah dreamed of narrow corridors, of cold air pressing against her neck, of eyes behind walls, and of Max, of how he had stood when no one else did, how he had known, when. Max finally opened his eyes, just a flicker. Sarah wept with a sound she hadn't made in months. Not since before the miscarriage, not since before Oakage. It was the sound of something breaking and something else being born. They named their daughter Faith Edith Anderson. Faith, for the hope that kept them moving when everything fell apart. Edith, for the neighbor who had given her life to buy them time. By the time spring came to Montana, they had moved again, to a modest ranch house far from Oakage, far from shadows. But the trauma lingered. Sarah started therapy with Dr. Singh. Blake built a new branch of his construction firm, specializing now in security, reinforced structures, freedom through foresight. And Max? Max guarded Faith's nursery. Every night. Every nap. Sometimes Sarah caught him staring at the walls, but he no longer growled. Harold visited monthly, his limp permanent now, but his eyes still sharp. He brought news. The Blackwood house was gone, razed to the foundation. The land turned over to the state for a memorial park. 27 women had lived in Dawson properties, 17 confirmed missing, 6 rescued alive from remote compounds, children born into darkness, now slowly led into light. And the network? Still being uncovered. 3 more homes in Oregon. Blueprints eerily familiar, same spaces between walls, same purpose. Elliot called it a hydra. Every head severed, revealing more. But Oakage was finished. The Dawsons were dead. The nightmare had ended, or at least begun to fade. And Sarah? She sat on her porch with Faith in her arms, Max at her feet, and Blake beside her. The sun was warm, the air clean, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel watched, not quite, not yet, but safer. And when Max's ears twitched toward the woods and Sarah followed his gaze, she didn't feel fear, just caution, just readiness. Because, she knew now, some nightmares never really die, but neither do those who survive them, to be continued.